Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to be breaking down an interview which is going absolutely viral on the internet at the moment. It is an interview between Piers Morgan and Andrew Tate on the riots which are happening in the UK. Now if you don't live in the UK, the riots are a little bit hard to understand, a little bit hard to follow, but that's not the reason why I'm reacting to this clip. I'm actually looking into the different sorts of persuasion and psychology which is going on in the background while this debate is happening. I've seen a few other people react to this interview and they've mainly just covered what's actually being said, but not the big battle which is happening. We've got two people who are both incredibly outspoken, who are both incredibly, persuasive. They are amazing at debates, both of them, and they also both know how to get attention and will do anything for it. So we've got this situation here where you've got two people who are masters of their craft arguing completely different points, and you want to see the psychology which is quickly happening right in front of your eyes. Now, before I continue, I know Andrew Tate and Piers Morgan are highly controversial figures. A lot of people hate Piers Morgan, a lot of people love him. A lot of people hate Andrew Tate, a lot of people love him as well. I want you to leave how you feel about each of these people behind, just so you can look at the psychology which is being used and the persuasion which is being used as well. So this is the interview I was talking about. Let's get a little bit of context on what's going on. Basically, Piers' entire point throughout the interview is that Andrew Tate is badly spreading misinformation, inciting crowds to riot even more. Andrew Tate is arguing that it's a bigger issue than what he's just saying. But this whole interview is about this, and watch how both of them try to push a point, defend another point, argue and try to concede a point in a place so they can win a different point. It's crazy the level of persuasion which is going on. Let's get a little bit of context though from the actual clip.
I just want to start by playing a clip of a video you posted to Instagram on the 29th of July that you posted to various social media platforms, in which was your response to what had happened.
So an undocumented migrant decided to go into a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knows where he's from. The media is, of course, hiding the fact that this is a 17-year-old male. They don't want to highlight how ridiculous it is that they allow military-aged males, combatants, to flood our shores. I don't see any protests in the UK. I don't see anybody complaining. Nobody's outside of the school. Nobody's outside the police station. The soul of the Western man is so broken that when the invaders slaughter your daughters, you do absolutely fucking nothing.
Now, that video has been viewed 15.1 million times. X limited the post's visibility because of its rules on hateful conduct. But the bottom line, Andrew, is that almost everything you said in that video was completely untrue. So my question for you is, why did you race to spread such woeful disinformation, given the massive following you have, and encourage people to take action?
So you've got the context of the situation now, and what Piers Morgan has done subtly here is he has then lent into the fact that Andrew Tate's got a huge audience. So he's starting to immediately provoke him and say, why would you say all of that misinformation when you have got a responsibility, because you know that people are going to listen and it's going to incite the crowds even more to riot.
I'll argue with you about the fact that everything I said was untrue. I think the only thing I said that was untrue is that perhaps he was undocumented. It was a 17-year-old male. It was a migrant. He did kill little girls. And advocating for people to stand outside and make it clear that they're unhappy with what happened is not a dangerous ideology. We live in a democracy where we have the right to protest and make it clear when our voices are not heard. I think that when people feel like they have a voice, they're not likely to get violent. And the problem we have now is that people do not have a voice, which is why we're seeing rioting, which is why we're seeing looting, because people do not feel like there's a political solution any longer. What I was trying to do is encourage people to stand up and make their voice heard in a peaceful way to avoid violence. Because when people feel like they're not heard, violence is always the end result.
So did you see what Tate did there? He didn't admit to the misinformation. Instead, what he said is, look, I just want to make sure that the people's voices that are often silenced are heard. So it was a good reframe and deflection onto, look, this isn't about me and what I said. Actually, what it's about is making sure people's voices are heard. Piers Morgan has come in with something trying to provoke him, and Tate has attempted to disarm and then deflect onto another issue, saying, look, this wasn't for me, this was for you guys.
You've actually had the complete opposite effect, and you know the massive following that you have and the influence that you can wield. And by spreading, I mean, again, you've repeated the fact this kid who has obviously now been charged with very serious crimes, including killing these 3 girls, was a migrant. It wasn't a migrant, he was born in Wales. His parents were legal immigrants from Rwanda. So he's not a migrant. He's somebody born in Wales, born in the United Kingdom.
So a way to defend a deflection, which is what Piers Morgan just did there, is he just tried to refocus the topic to, look, this was misinformation. Please admit this is misinformation. So what he's trying to do now is he's trying to get Tate to concede a point, because then he knows that if he gets him to commit to the fact that his video was misinformation, it was a wrong point, then the rest of the argument is just not going to go Tate's way at all. But Tate knows this, and now what he's going to do is attempt to defend that again.
That's the first thing. Here's where we have the dichotomy of the UK, and I actually think this conversation is going to be one of the most important and potent conversations of modern times, especially as this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon, Piers, is that we have a certain subsect of the population who believe because he was born in Cardiff, he is a Welsh man, and we have another subsect of the population who believe that even if he was born in Cardiff, he is not Welsh. I'm currently in Romania. I'm an American and British citizen. The woman who I have a child with is Italian. The child was born in Romania. The Romanians do not consider that child Romanian. In the West, in the democracies, we do. But we have a problem because you now have a dichotomy of ideas. You have two different camps, and the camp that believe that this person perhaps isn't even Welsh in the first place are also the camp which are being suppressed, not allowed to speak, and are being labeled as far right for having genuine concerns. And that is why things are getting exasperated and out of control. What we need is conversation. There's a lot of people who have a point of view. They didn't feel like they had a political solution anymore. And this is what's happening. The reason this dichotomy exists, Piers, please understand, they're starting to get concerned for the safety of their children, and they don't feel like there's any kind of political solution.
You can see Piers Morgan looking down here because he's starting to get a little bit annoyed. Andrew Tate has answered the question of, why do you think this dichotomy exists? Piers has asked the question, do you think your video that you put out was misinformation? This is called media training. People who are public figures who take a lot of media training are often taught that they should answer the question that they want to answer and not the question which is being asked of him. We can see that Piers Morgan's actually getting a little bit annoyed here because he has specifically asked the question of, this video that you've put out, do you agree that it's misinformation because all the facts you stated in it were wrong? And Tate has answered with, this is a huge issue. If we want other people to live in this country, in the UK, and they've all coming from lots of different places, we need people's voices to be heard. We need people to understand each other's values. This is the problem with the different dichotomies here. And he's not answered that question at all. He's answered his own question, which is actually exactly what you get taught in media training. Piers can feel that he is losing the frame here because Tate has taken the frame, deflected on it, started answering his own question, and he said it with such conviction and such confidence that he knows that a lot of the audience will be nodding along to what he's saying. And what he's saying, by the way, isn't wrong, but it's just not the question that he was asked.
This is a fail of the politicians. This is a failure of the leaders. It is a job of a leader to inspire all of the people to have trust in.
So now he's going down the track of what the job of a leader is, to inspire, to make sure, everyone's doing okay, to support everyone. It's not at all what's being asked of him. He's deflected off the answer, and Piers knows that if he interrupts him now, Tate's probably just going to talk over him. Piers knows that he's in this position now where he's going to look bad and he's going to look like he's cutting the guest off if he interjects and says, hey, that wasn't the question, because there is a certain amount of public perception which happens regardless of what's actually happening on the screen. Tate is very good at perception control, perception management, and he's doing it live right in front of you right now, using his persuasive abilities to control the conversation.
It is his job as a leader to have every single person in the country believe that he cares about the issue and he's doing something actively to fix it. Instead, what Keir did was stand up and do the absolute opposite. Shut down any legitimate concerns, tell people they don't have a voice, tell people nothing's going to change, is going to stay exactly.
Again, this is nothing to do with what he was asked.
The way it is. Let me tell you something. I want to make this very clear. There's a lot of people in the world who would rather go to jail and have a warm bed and 3 square meals a day than watch their children die. There's a lot of people who would rather go to jail than watch their society collapse in real time around them. There's a lot of people who would really rather go to jail than feel unsafe to walk.
Can you see what he's doing now? He's appealing to emotion and he's using people's fears, people's worries about what's currently going on, and he's amping them up to further argue his point. There's people who would prefer having 3 meals a day, being in a jail cell and not being worried about their relatives. He's taking that and now he's appealing to the audience. Piers completely lost control at this point.
These are people who have lived in the same place for a very long time. They have a vested interest in this geographical location. And without political solutions being offered, I don't know how hubristic you must be to sit and expect anything other than what we've seen. This is a failure of leadership. And that's what's so disappointing about it.
And that's what was disappointing about it. So what he's done is he's casually framed this as if the question was, what do you find most disappointing about the state of affairs in this country? He's answered his own question there, and he said it with such confidence, using emotional appeal to get the audience on his side, deflecting off what the actual point was. And I want to see next if Piers Morgan actually tries to bring this back to his initial point.
First of all Keir Starmer has said, as far as I can see, is that he is going to bring the full force of the law against people who committed acts of violence.
The problem is now is Piers has been dragged off the topic of what he was originally arguing. He's getting lost in the detail because that was a really long answer and there was a lot to unpack there. And he's got lots of different things to refute. And this is an effective way to win an argument if you look at two people arguing as well. A big long answer with a lot to unpack doesn't relate to the initial concern at all, because now you've got to respond to all these little tiny fires to put them out whilst losing sight on what the original point was. And Piers is actually getting dragged into this right now.
There were far-right thugs who were leading this. They were attacking mosques, chanting anti-Muslim chants. They were doing this because people had put out there. Hang on, you've had your say. I'm going to have my say now. It was put out falsely on social media.
And you see what Tate's doing now? He's dragging him off, and these little fires that Piers is trying to put out, Tate is actually adding fuel to the fire. You know, if there was a black person in the crowd, would you say that all of the crowd was black? He's very right in what he's saying. But again, that's not the point that he was originally arguing.
On July the 30th, you posted a picture saying, this is the man from Cardiff. We're looking at this picture now. The murder.
So in this section, Piers is factually true. He's showing a screenshot of exact words that Andrew Tate has said. So it's very hard to defend against this.
Little girl, straight off a boat, you said. Really? He wasn't straight off a boat because this wasn't the person who perpetrated the crimes. You got 4.3 million views for this. And a community notes clarified, this is not the man that attacked the children and adults in Southport. This image is of Kasonga Mabulu, who was arrested in Ireland in 2023 for a random knife attack at Dublin Airport. So again, you know, 24 hours later, you're posting.
Very hard to defend against that. Let's see what Tate does now.
Okay.
You're posting more. No, you're posting complete disinformation.
Oh, I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
sir.
It's not okay.
Oh, no,
it was not the man.
Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of course. I got the wrong stabber.
So Tate sarcastically is replying, oh, did I get the wrong stabber? He's deflecting Piers' argument. What he's trying to do is he's minimizing the error. Piers has provided complete proof. So very clever by Tate there. It looks from Piers' argument, it was a completely solid, you know, airtight argument that Tate has basically spread misinformation there. He has got his own words on the screen right there being shown to him that he's got, you know, spreading misinformation. And what does Tate do? He's got nowhere else to go, but he does something very, very, very clever. What he does is he minimizes Piers' argument. Oh, have I got the wrong stabber? Oh, I'm really sorry about that. And by minimizing the error and treating it as trivial, what he's doing is he's gaslighting Piers. He's making him seem completely unreasonable. He's making him seem like Piers is exaggerating as well. And what he'll do next is he'll probably shift the audience's focus onto the broader issues again, which is, I think, his only place to go in this debate here.
I also want to make something very clear to all the people at home and clear to you. Most of the white people are very frustrated and they're finding an enemy amongst...
Most of the white people are very frustrated. There we go. He's doing this thing again where he's saying, don't look here, don't look here, look over here to the viewer. And he's going for that emotional appeal. He's getting into the minds, the pains, the fears of the audience, so it resonates with them.
Keir did not just only say they're going to face the full force of the law. He told everybody with a point of view, everybody concerned about the safety of their children, that they are extremists. That's the most aggravating language you can possibly choose when people finally have had enough of not feeling safe on their own streets any longer. We have people who cannot afford to pay their bills watching migrants arrive who are now being held up in hotels at the taxpayers' expense for indefinite periods of time. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Nobody voted for it.
He's going for these emotional appeals again. He's riling the audience up right now as Piers is actually telling him off for riling the audience up. He's creating that common enemy for everyone to unite behind him. So when people listen to this interview, they'll think, you know, Tate has got it absolutely right here. Ignoring the fact that this is not what the interview is actually about.
Nobody wants it, and everybody's struggling to pay their bills. Energy prices are through the roof. Inflation is through the roof.
What has energy prices through the roof, inflation through the roof got to do with these racial incidents and these riots as well? I know he's trying to argue the point that people are already angry. What he's really arguing is that there's a common enemy out there and people should unite behind it, and it's the elites trying to take that money from you.
Now they no longer feel safe on their streets. They don't want to put their daughters outside to play. The police won't protect them. The police won't turn up for most crimes unless it's something you say bad on Facebook. And when they look for a political solution, they're ignored. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? This is nothing but a leadership failure. There's not a country in the world where leadership could fail this spectacularly.
He's making these points far more compelling by adding in all this emotion about societal collapse. He's really, I live in the UK, he really is exaggerating like the absolute cause of, is really getting to the heart of why everyone is really angry at the moment and in, you know, crazy states as well. It's a very effective plan and tactic that he's currently using right now against Piers Morgan as a deflection. He's rallying the audience while minimizing Piers' points.
But once again, Andrew, you are spouting nonsense. You say, for example, nobody voted for the UK to support Ukraine. We've just voted Keir Starmer in with a landslide majority, and he made it clear before that election that he would be contributing billions of our pounds to help the people of Ukraine thwart a Russian dictator. Well, you may laugh, but you just literally said the complete opposite. So we did actually vote for a leader and a party that was completely committed to dedicating billions of pounds of taxpayer money.
It's important what Piers is doing here. He's using something called the authority bias. I've seen him that he's interviewed Tate a bunch of times now. But what he knows here is that Tate can take these conversations and go off on one and control the dynamic, control the frame. Very persuasive, very manipulative as well. So Piers is doing his own manipulation here, and he's refuting his points by making himself an authority. Actually, this happened. Details, specifics, facts. This happened then. This is how much money it was. You're wrong, right? It's called authority bias, being in the know, showing expertise on the subject. He's doing his own form of persuasion here.
Most people are starting to realize and wake up from the matrix and understand there are no political solutions because it's all a scam and it's all a lie. What we need is people to understand at home that we have to think outside the box and vote for somebody who's not part of this two-party, uni-party insanity, which is why I was a fan of Nigel Farage. Even if he sells me down the river, even if he says I'm a bad person, that's his prerogative and that's his decision to make. I still believe he's the best choice as a leader for the UK.
Well, Nigel Farage is not just... Well, hang on. Nigel Farage has literally just chucked you under a monumental bus. He's gone on LBC radio and he said the reason that he himself was promoting complete nonsense about the person who committed these heinous crimes was...
Piers is exaggerating to try and put Andrew Tate in a corner there. And you can see, if we just skip back a little bit, Tate didn't expect this. It pissed him off a little bit.
Farage has literally just chucked you under a monumental bus. He's gone on LBC radio and he said...
Look at him look down now. He's trying to interpret how he can come back from this because he's just publicly committed and supported Nigel Farage, and it just turns out that that's not his ally at all. So he's put his head down now. You can see in his body language that he's like, oh, why did I just do that? I've trapped myself in a corner now. Piers' body language is lightened up now. He is ready to pounce now on what is a broken friendship.
The reason that he himself was promoting complete nonsense about the person who committed these heinous crimes.
He's back in the room now and he's ready to say something and respond with something. He's thought of it. You could see the exact moment where he thought of something. Look at this. Let me just turn the sound down for just a second. Boom, he's got that point ready to go now. He's thought of another point. Both of these people are very high verbal IQ. They are very outspoken, very persuasive as well, and they can bat to each other like this to try and get their points over each other.
Nonsense about the person who committed these heinous crimes was because of people like you. Andrew Tate, he names you. He says that you were responsible for spinning disinformation.
You can see that Tate is frustrated here. If you look on his blazer here, you can see that he's either moving his fingers fast or tapping his knee, which is a sign that he's irritated now.
Everybody wants to live in peace. A lot of people talk about the idea of war, but let me promise you, Piers, I'm a person who's had a very varied life. When you see people with machetes outside your door threatening you...
See, what's happening now is they're actually arguing the same point, but they're saying it in a way which seems like they're not arguing the same point. Piers is arguing for peace, Tate is arguing for peace, right on this example here, right? And they're both saying it in a way which is appealing to the audience. Both of them are doing it. Appealing to the audience in a way which they know that everyone likes to hear this truth, and they're trying their best to almost signal to the audience like, hey, I am the most virtuous out of the people that you're watching on screen right now.
police aren't answering the phone anymore. You don't want war. The Muslims want peace. The white natives of the UK, the Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when you have a political class which refuse to listen to anybody, do whatever they want, grind everyone into poverty, then you're going to have some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person.
So Tate in his content, he just slipped up a little bit there. Usually he calls people brokies and poor, right? But he realized that this was not the time and place to do that because he's trying to actually win the audience's appeal right there. So he accidentally just called them all the poor people, which I thought was quite funny. Just watch that bit again.
Some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person as opposed to turning on the rich elites who are just plundering the country. That's the truth of what's happening.
What is
you
I
watched
think
my
what is
video.
really...
We played it.
Yeah.
The only thing I had incorrect was that he was...
He doesn't want to let Piers speak here, so he's just going to get louder until Piers shuts up, and he's going to keep with his train of thought. The more he can do this, the more he can steal the frame from Piers. Remember, guys, this whole conversation is about getting Tate to admit that his video was misinformation. We have went off on a million subjects, but one thing Tate hasn't let happen is he hasn't let himself admit that that video was misinformation. He's not committed to that because he knows that is Piers' only objective, and once Piers gets that, the interview is going to be crushed.
Undocumented. That's the only thing you could perhaps say he was incorrect.
Yeah.
And I'm pointing out this very obvious truth. If we're not going to be able to point out the truth, what do you expect besides anger? To address this without being called racist, without being called far right, I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth.
So somehow Tate has switched this entire conversation round to now that Piers isn't telling the truth, right? When the whole conversation is about that Tate wasn't telling the truth, he was actually spreading misinformation. Tate has taken this entire frame, flipped it on his head, and now he's accusing the interviewer of not telling the truth, right? So let's see how Piers is reacting to this.
Well, I mean, the sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news is breathtaking, right? On the 1st of August, you posted a cartoon saying typical man from Cardiff. When you say typical man from Cardiff, you are again telling people that in your estimation, the person that committed this came in as an illegal migrant on a boat. That is not true.
Bringing it back to that main point there, that this is misinformation once again. See how Tate handles this.
None of that is true.
Well, what I'm actually doing, Piers, because you may not be aware of this because you're part of the legacy media machine, which is why you defended Israel so heavily.
I'm on YouTube.
You're not allowed to have your
I'm
own
on
opinion.
YouTube.
You're not
I'm
allowed.
on legacy media.
You're part of the
My
legacy
show is
media
on
machine,
YouTube.
and you're not allowed to have your own
And it's
opinion. But let me
uncensored.
explain something
Every
to you,
word
Piers.
of this will go up, as you know.
Perfect.
This is an ad hominem attack on Piers Morgan, and he's critiquing the media now. So there's a lot of distrust in the media. Rightly so, right? Because they do all these manipulative tactics. But what Tate's position is now, he's going to group Piers in with this misinformation, you know, how the legacy media are just a machine of spitting out propaganda, and he's doing the exact same thing to Piers Morgan now to distance himself from the fact that he's being accused of misinformation. It's a very effective strategy. He's now attacking Piers Morgan's credibility. He's completely discrediting him. Remember, Piers Morgan's credibility throughout this entire clip has relied on the fact that these are the facts, these are the details. He's using that authority bias. So now Tate knows this, and what he's doing is he's attempting to disarm him as much as possible by just grouping him in with the other medias which spread misinformation. Very, very, very effective argument. He's doing this without addressing the actual key point of the argument.
Understand exactly how the media machine works. The fact that they kept highlighting that he's from Cardiff and showing pictures of him as a child, as opposed to showing pictures of him as the large barbaric man he was, which stabbed those little girls, was a deliberate PR spin by the propaganda arm of the British.
Yeah, so what he's talking about now is when sometimes a person has, you know, committed a serious crime in the UK, what happens is, depending on if the media want you to sympathize with that person, they'll either show a really terrible picture of the person if they don't want you to sympathize with them, and they will actually show, you know, maybe like a picture of the person as a child, because everyone knows that people just see kids as innocent, right? They see them as sympathetic people. So they do this deliberately, but even more so, which Tate isn't touching on, that sometimes the media does this just to get controversy. Media doesn't care about the truth. What they care about is a big public reaction. So what Tate hasn't covered here is that sometimes if it's a serious attack, what they do is they stick a picture of the perpetrator as a child. They take a picture of the perpetrator as a kid and put it in all the newspapers and all the, you know, online articles as well. And they do it deliberately not to actually generate sympathy, but to anger the public, because all the media cares about is attention and controversy. Let's skip a little bit along in the interview to see the outcome of it, to see if Tate continually manages to deflect while also starting to blame Piers for misinformation. Let's see how he's argued his point here.
Everybody's ability to express their opinion. And let me tell you something. People who don't feel politically represented at least feel like they have freedom of speech online. If you take that away as well, things are going to get a lot worse. It's going to be worse for the country. Piers, you have to be careful sitting here on your show telling people that unless they said what you want them to say, they're not allowed to be on the internet. You are talking Stalinist,
When did I say that?
It's communist, it's dangerous.
Tate has just done something very, very unique there. He's saying that it's very, very wrong for you to tell people that they can't express their opinions. He's saying this, but then he's also grouping Piers in with all these terrible, terrible things as well. He's calling him a communist. He's saying, you know, that's what Stalin used to do as well. This is very effective ways to lower Piers Morgan's credibility here. And Piers' whole argument here is to have his authority, to use credible evidence that he can say, the details, the facts, this is what you said, this is when you did it, credible, credible, credible. So what Tate's doing now is he's creating this emotion around Piers and saying, hey, look, what you're saying here is more or less the same as all these other terrible things as well. It's called the anchoring bias. So he's grouping him in with all these other terrible things. What happens with the anchoring bias is that when you have information that you know is bad information, so for instance, you know that Stalin or Hitler is a really bad guy, right? And then somebody compares somebody else to Hitler, you've instantly got all these visual images going around your head, these very persuasive images, and now you're starting to think bad about that person because there's this anchoring effect which happens because you've already got a preconceived notion about what this person's like, even if you haven't met them. And Tate is cleverly discredited Piers here by just saying your views are basically extreme.
When did I say that?
You said that anyone who says anything is causing the riots directly, and they're directly responsible, and there's no powder keg in the UK due to a failure of the policing and the judiciary and the politicians. Piers, be very careful what you say.
So Tate has turned this entire thing around now, so that he's saying Piers is the one who's spreading misinformation and causing more damage to society by, you know, his show and his public voice. It's kind of crazy to watch this. So Tate could have come on here, and we've seen it with other people that Piers has argued with in the past. When Piers argues with someone, they get all defensive and they say, no, I'm not like that. No, I don't do that, etc., etc., etc. Right? But what Tate has done here is he's just not acknowledged at all the accusations that Piers is making. Instead, he's deflected and then says, you're actually that person instead. Very effective way to change the situation. Look at Tate's face here. You can see he's got that face like, admit it. And Piers' face here is a little bit like, what on earth is going on?
Listen, I'll take your lectures morning, noon and night. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But would you like to take this opportunity to tell the rioters to stop rioting? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Well, considering I've been saying that for the last 4 days on Twitter and you didn't read any of the tweets out, they should be in front of you. There's at least 30. Let me make it clear to the people on both sides of the equation, all of my brothers in Islam and all of the Christians and native people of the UK who feel like they're underrepresented. You have more in common with the people you live amongst than you do with these political elites. The people you live amongst love their children and they're struggling to pay the bills exactly like you are. There's no reason for UK, one of the greatest countries in the world, one of the largest empires in history, to be plunged into poverty if it wasn't being looted by a political class that do not care about you. And the people who do not care about you, the number one thing they want is the different breeds or different types or different categories of...
Pay attention here, Piers is not along, and what Tate's saying is very, very true. Again, he's a master at creating common enemies that everyone can unite behind, and he's doing it right now. And he's getting actually buy-in from Piers, who's nodded along in agreement to what he's saying. Super, super persuasive.
There's no reason why it has to be the way it is unless a political class was failing the people who they're supposed to represent for generations. And that's where this anger and hatred comes from. Not because a video was made on Twitter. That is so infantile and asinine to believe that some little bit started all of these things.
Here's what
that is what's happening. So stop rioting amongst each other and realize who the real enemy of your freedom is.
Again, uniting everyone under that common enemy. And Piers is a little bit, he's lost control of this again now.
You understand the truth about this world. Listen, racism is what they use to divide the poor people, to stop us realizing that they lie about every single thing on the news, that they inflate the currency constantly, they send our money away to wars we're not interested in, nobody can afford their bills, nobody can afford health care, and you're going to die alone in some nursing home because you can't afford a nice house, because even then they're going to inheritance tax it.
Once again, Tate has said loads of true things, a message that people can get behind again, and Piers just can't argue with that. What he's going to try and do now is he's going to bring it back to the original initial argument, which they still haven't settled on.
all lies, and you hold them to account because they lie and don't tell the truth.
Correct.
And yet these riots,
Correct.
you claim were just organic reaction to the problems of the country. No, they weren't. These riots happened because far-right thugs acted on false information that the perpetrator of these wicked crimes against these 3 little girls that were killed and many others that were seriously wounded was an illegal Muslim who come into the country, was on MI6 terror watch list. That is why these riots happened, and that was all a despicable lie designed to make completely the wrong idea. And as a result of those lies, mosques belonging to your religion that you've converted to were then attacked.
To God.
As were asylum seeker hotels, because people believed it was an illegal migrant when it wasn't. It was all lies. And you, as the great espouser of truth who hates lying, should be the first to say that anyone that spread any of those false rumors about him being a Muslim, about him being an illegal immigrant, about him being on the MI6 terror watch list, you should condemn unreservedly anyone who spread any of those false rumors, because they're the things that inspired these riots.
Wow. So what did you think about that? You've got, on one hand, Piers, who's trying to control the conversation, and he just wants Tate to commit to the point that the initial video had things in it which weren't true. Tate knows this, and he's deflecting at every opportunity, is doing all these crazy persuasive things to, unite the viewer behind a common goal. Tate knows that it doesn't matter what is said in this interview as long as the viewer supports him. Because when you have a whole crowd of people backing you, even if what they're backing you on isn't actually true, or maybe it's been taken out of context and something like that, or maybe they've just got all riled up with their emotions, he knows that doesn't matter. And that public perception, that backing from society, will actually just make you seem like you are the one in the right. So we've seen on this conversation both highly persuasive people, both very, very outspoken. If this was a video game, they would both be level 100 in, Persuasion being outspoken, master debaters. You can see that basically just on this situation, they are going for each other, taking completely different, it's like ping pong, right? They're taking completely different routes. Tate is now blaming Piers for misinformation. He's then using all of his abilities to try and discredit him, grouping him in with other people as well. Piers is providing all this factual evidence. You said this at this time. Here's a screenshot. How can you, refuse to even acknowledge this? And it's a crazy conversation, really, really interesting. 2 high-level persuasive people fighting against each other. Guys, what do you think of this interview? Is there anything that I missed here? Is there any subtle things that I might have missed in this breakdown? This is the first time that I watched it all the way through. I skimmed through it just before this. But let me know in a comment below. Please keep the comments clean as well. We're looking at the psychology of this situation, the persuasion of the situation, not necessarily what's being discussed, but how it's being discussed, how it's being presented. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and want to see something else like this. And take it easy.